Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to Town Meeting TV's coverage of Town Meeting Day 2025. My name is Emily Brewer, and I will be moderating tonight's forum. This program is part of a series of candidate forums hosted by Town Meeting TV in advance of the Town Meeting Day election, which is next Tuesday, March 4th. These forums are made possible by Town Meeting TV's generous underwriting partners. Thank you so much. You can find all of our forums at cctv.org/TMD2025. And now you can find information about our live results show, which will be on Election Day as well. You can also watch on our Town Meeting TV YouTube channel, where auto-generated captions are available. If you're tuning in on YouTube, click the subscribe button to stay tuned into local democracy this election season. So on tonight's program, we will hear from 3 candidates who are running for a seat on the South Burlington School Board. Those candidates are incumbent candidate Tim Warren and Laura Williams, who are both running for a 3-year term, which is uncontested because there are 2 open seats for that term. And then we're also joined by Emily Hoffman, who is running as a write-in candidate for a seat that is 1 year remaining on a 3-year term. And that seat is actually, there's another write-in candidate also running for that seat. So this is a bit of a part 2 of the South Burlington School Board candidate forum. So thank you so much for tuning in. And if you are tuning in live, you're welcome to call in with questions. Please call 802-862-3966. And if you do call in, we'll do our best to prioritize your question. But we do ask that you share your name and the town you live in. And with that being said, I think we can get started with opening statements. So we're going to start with Emily. So if you could please tell us why you're running, how you're qualified to serve on the school board, and what will be different for South Burlington schools if you're elected.
All right, thank you, Emily. My name is Emily Hoffman. I grew up in South Burlington, where I was known as Emily DiFerdinando before I was married. And now my husband and I are raising our 4 children here, 3 of who have graduated and 1 who's in 3rd grade. I was inspired to run because I felt that I have a unique perspective, having been the child of an administrator in the district, a student, a parent. Actually, I worked at the school for a couple of years, and also a taxpayer. So I'm hoping that that multifaceted point of view can help bridge all of us together who care so much about the students at South Burlington and are trying to figure out how we can make it work all together and make as many people happy as we can. So my inspiration had to do with the fact that I've seen the district change a lot in the past years since my little ones were in elementary school. My big ones were in elementary school to when my little one is. The school has changed dramatically. The district climate is just much different. I think it has to do with the added responsibilities of post-COVID mixed with added responsibilities that teachers have on them in terms of new assessments and creating curriculum for different levels in their class, which are good things, but they all came together at the same time, which I think was stressful. So my other priority is to empower teachers and help them kind of move through this, and also promote some transparency between the board and the community, so we can try to work together and make sure that everyone feels like their voice is heard, even if they're not happy, they're heard. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emily. And now, Laura, can you tell us why you're running again and what will be different for South Burlington schools if you're reelected?
Okay, great. So I'm running because I believe in strong public schools that I believe that they are necessary for a strong and healthy democracy, and I do want to continue to support the South Burlington School District. So I've been a school board member for 2.5 years, I believe. I'm also a teacher in a neighboring district, so I will bring a teacher voice to the board, which I do think is really important because most people on the board have really never been in a school as an educator or staff member or anything, so I do think I can speak to what the day-to-day life is like, which I think is really important. So I also, being on the school board allowed me to run for the Vermont School Board Association, which I think is really important, particularly in this climate when we are on the brink of possibly a very significant change in our education system. And I'm actually quite worried about it. And because the local control that we value and that we love could possibly not be here in a couple of years. So I definitely, by me being on the school board and then on the VSBA, I'll have a voice in that, in how it's rolled out, if it's done fairly, and just to have eyes and ears on it. So that's mainly it in a nutshell. I do bring my teacher voice. I do have some experience now, 2.5 years, and I do really believe strongly in public education and South Burlington in particular. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah.
And finally, Tim, your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. So, pardon me. So I've been a resident of South Burlington for 25 years. I've had 3 children in the system. I really believe strongly in the South Burlington School District and the quality of education that my kids have received. I want to see that continue. So like Laura, I'm an existing board member. I've had an opportunity to be on the board for a little over a year now. And I'll say that it's been quite a learning experience. You know, every meeting you learn a little bit more about how the board works, the rhythm of the board, kind of what we are, you know, what we have from an expectations perspective and how we operate. So it would be easy enough for me to say, you know, hey, I did my time, I've done my community service, let somebody else step up. But I really believe that one of the most important aspects of an efficient and effective board is continuity. So it would be easy again for me to step off, but I believe based on the fact that I've got some experience now, come prepared to the meetings, that it actually helps the board overall if you can have some of that continuity and people who understand how the system operates. Right? So again, that's really what I want to do, is just continue the work that I've been doing for a year or so now, and hopefully continue to see the schools be as effective and a great place to be as they've been for my daughters.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you all for being here and for stepping up to run for the South Burlington School Board. So we will move right down the line of questions here, and for this next question on the school budget, we're going to start with Laura.
Okay.
And so the question is, do you support this year's school budget of $71.5 million? How would you address the challenges facing the state education fund and the impact on Burlington schools and taxpayers?
Well, it's a great question. So yes, I do think we need to support the budget. The tax increase is coming in at 7.93%, which is actually less than the 8.18% I believe it was when we passed it on the third try. So I know everything's expensive. I'm a taxpayer too. I'm paying it. However, the tax rate is lower than where it was in the third try last year. It's also one of the lower tax rates in the county, you know, which may or may not be saying something, but it is lower, and it's super challenging to maintain a quality education while trying to pass a budget that everybody can support and afford. So that is truly a challenge. We've been tasked with something that was really, really quite difficult. I do think that the superintendent and the chief financial officer, the senior financial officer, did a really great job with all the complications. And yes, as I mentioned before, I am on the VSBA, so I am working following the legislature quite closely. Things do feel out of control right now. I mean, certainly as a teacher, I can tell you it feels like an attack on a local, state, and federal level, given what's happening. However, the one thing we can control is this local control we have right now. It's not going away this year. And so I feel like this is the one thing we can control. We should really vote for this budget. And the thing is, the problem is, and again, people are obviously can vote however they want. The thing is, more cuts will have to be made, and that's what I want people to understand. So, yes, I strongly support this budget.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Yeah, thank you. And
Tim, the same question about the school budget for you.
Sure. Yes, so I was one of the board members who voted to approve the budget when it was brought forward to us. I think it's important to understand that last year the board elected to apply a $3 million plus surplus as revenue last year, and by doing that, we actually did reduce our tax rate ultimately. That was in front of the voters. And we also drew less from the education fund, which meant that overall our education spending appeared less than it otherwise would have been. So last year we faced a choice: use the revenue, or use the surplus as revenue, or have significant cuts, and we chose to apply the surplus as revenue. This year, as we looked at it, what we didn't do, like in many of our neighboring districts, is we didn't constrain the superintendent with a specific target number for a budget or a particular tax rate increase. And personally, I felt that would have been sort of a backwards way to approach the budget. Instead, we did ask for cost containment. We did provide some guidelines. And ultimately, I think we landed on a budget that provides our students what they need without implementing sort of these draconian cuts that would have significantly impacted programming and staffing, right? So I want to recognize that an addition of this year, again, another almost 8% tax rate increase is pretty significant and is going to impact many of our constituents in the community. I do want to frame it, however, in the terms of our education spending per pupil. If you look at South Burlington's per pupil education spending, which is essentially how much dollars we draw per weighted pupil from the Ed Fund after we've accounted for revenues, South Burlington has always been significantly lower than many of the other districts in our region. This year, even with our tax increase, we are at the same per pupil spending level as other districts. Even when those districts are implementing significant constraints, with our 8% ask of the community, we are right with Colchester, Burlington, CVU. We're all at about the same per pupil spending. So even with this budget going up several millions of dollars, we are not expending extravagantly, and I just want to make that clear to the community.
Great. Thank you, Tim. And finally, Emily, your thoughts on this year's school budget?
Sure. This one is a tricky question because I do think that almost $72 million is a burden on the taxpayers. It's a heavy lift, but I support the school budget for the main reason that I don't want more cuts to happen to student-facing services. And I do believe the students will be the ones to suffer if this budget does not pass. There are certain numbers that are going to stay the same no matter whether or not we pass this budget. So if it doesn't go through, there are numbers that I think the community is not so happy about that are not going to change. So the thing that will change is what the students and the teachers get for resources. And that I really want to keep that as high as we can. As I said, I think if we go and have to cut more, that's just going to put more pressure on the teachers, which is going to harm the quality of education that they're able to give the children. So I'm hopeful if it doesn't pass, I'm hopeful that we could keep it as few student-facing line items cut as possible, but really we're going to have to do what we have to do. And I've seen budgets cut a lot over the years and pass maybe the third time. And it doesn't feel good for the community. It doesn't feel good for the teachers. And I hope that we can come together to understand the numbers, even though $72 million sounds like a lot to think about the tax increase and what that actual number is going to be to your tax bill. If we can kind of put aside the things that the community is not so happy about in terms of people's salaries and understand that this is for the betterment of our students' education, which helps everybody. In terms of the changes at the state level, I don't exactly know what's to come. I do understand that if this happens, the state will be the one to decide what everyone's budget is, but of course we might not have enough with the budget that the state gives us, and we might have to ask for funds from the taxpayers in the end as well. So I guess at that point, we just kind of have to identify certain risks and try to mitigate them.
Sure. Great, thank you so much. And we will move right along to our next question, which has to do with challenges. So Tim, what is the biggest challenge facing South Burlington schools, and how would you use your seat on the school board to address this issue? So,
I mean, we have a myriad of challenges, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll identify, I know you asked for one, but I'll identify two that I think are pretty critical. First, I think our aging infrastructure is really going to catch up with us. We didn't pay a lot of attention to it last year, other than trying to use our $3 million surplus to put into capital reserve to address a lot of the structural issues that we have in our 5 buildings. And there are significant issues in our buildings. You know, that said, that is something we cannot continue to bury our heads in the sand on. I know 5 years ago with the bond that was proposed, you know, that went down pretty significantly. But that in 5 years, our buildings have not aged better, right? They've gotten worse, and we're continuing to put money into them. That is only going to increase as the years go on. So it's going to be harder to come back to the community and ask for bonds for additional improvements again and again and again, especially in light of the current ask with our budget and other needs. My other real, and I'll just say it quickly, my other real concern is that over the last few years, you know, there's been a huge focus on cuts and getting rid of stuff and you know, overspending, right? I would like us, you know, I'm really concerned about our cuts in programming, our cuts in staffing, you know, especially those wraparound staffing, that staff that wraps around the teachers and helps them, behavioral specialists, instructional coaches. You know, these are the kinds of supports that, you know, we need not just for the kids, but for our teaching staff, and we continually cut away at that. And that's important fabric that supports everybody in our schools, right? And so those are my two big concerns, is that we have an aging infrastructure and we continue to chip away at what really makes our schools successful.
Thank you, Tim. And Emily, what do you see as one of the biggest challenges facing South Burlington?
I think I would say I always have the mindset of a teacher. I'm not a teacher, but I grew up around teachers. My dad was a teacher, my sisters are teachers, extended family are teachers, and my husband was a teacher for 12 years before changing his career last year. So I talk to a lot of teachers, many of my friends are teachers, and I just feel like the way that the teachers are feeling right now is pretty, they're not able to do what they want to do for the kids, and they're not feeling as supported, they're not feeling like they have what they need to make things the way they want it to be in the school. So I would love to try to help support them, and as Tim mentioned, the wraparound support is so important. My sister is a paraeducator, and she tells me a lot about the challenges she faces on a daily basis. And if we can't figure out a way to help them and to help them feel like they're back in a climate where they're happy to be every day, which in turn just makes everything else work much better. And when the children can see it when a teacher is stressed out. And I think they try, but you can't hide everything. And my main focus, I think, is if we can get some support for the teachers, I think that will affect everything else as a ripple effect in terms of how the kids feel, how the parents feel when their kids come home and say, school was great today. And then maybe the parents will be more excited to pass that budget to give the kids what they need.
Great, thank you, Emily. And Laura, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges facing South Burlington schools?
Let's see. Well, like Tim, I guess there are two. It's you know, it's always the infrastructure. This plan that Secretary Zoe Saunders is promoting does not allow for building for infrastructure. And so, you know, to come up with a brand new plan and expect everybody to work in the same buildings that are really not healthy or adequate, I think is a huge problem. And I am also quite concerned about how teachers are feeling, and I think as board members, we could do a better job of asking for their input, because since the person in the classroom actually has to do the job, that person should be the one saying what he or she needs. So that is I think that is really critical. And again, that's why I'm glad I'm on the VSBA to also have a voice on the state level as well, because if this new program goes through, I really worry about teachers' voice being completely lost at that point. So I think at this point we've got to, like, while we still have the local control, and maybe people, you know, Secretary Saunders will see the value of that, sure, and the plan will change. I don't know, but thank you.
All right, thank you all for that. And just want to remind folks, if you're watching this live, you can call in with your questions at 802-862-3966. And with that, we'll move on to our next question, which has to do with neurodivergent students. So we're going to start with Emily on this question. How can South Burlington schools best support neurodivergent students?
Thanks. I think the district has been improving their support systems for neurodivergent children, and the society in general has really come to understand more about neurodiversity, and it's not something that we need to pretend isn't happening or people don't feel the way that they're feeling, and make it seem like it's something you shouldn't be okay to be yourself with. So I think we can continue to better support them. I think some of the areas for neurodivergence where we could really help is behavioral issues and executive functioning and social challenges. And I really feel like the students are a part of that too, but creating an accepting classroom, and they'll understand that from the teacher who I think teachers are creating those kinds of situations with like lunch bunches in elementary school, getting different kinds of kids together to socialize and practice that in a safe place. And then teachers are trying to, calmly validate students' feelings, but also trying to get them to express themselves in a more appropriate way for the classroom so that other students aren't so disrupted. And also, executive functioning is something that everybody could help to learn with. So I think just kind of giving teachers more of those resources and training and just keeping up with the best practices and just encouraging that kind of environment.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And Laura, how can South Burlington schools best support neurodivergent students?
Again, another really good question. I do think South Burlington does a good job in this area. I also think that Tier 1, which is the classroom instruction, again, I think we need to ask teachers what they need, because right now being in that room and let's say you have 20 children, 10 of whom could be classified as neurodivergent, that is a huge percentage. And you're one person and you have a lot of plans, a lot of programs, a lot of personnel, and I can speak for teachers, we want to meet all of those needs. You are one person. So I don't necessarily have an idea. I would like to get ideas from other teachers. I mean, I do have some ideas, but really from the South Burlington teachers and staff, what do you need in Tier 1 to help you, create the best environment for the children in your room? So that would be that. And again, I do think South Burlington is doing a decent job. It's also a very difficult job. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
And Tim, finally, this question for you on neurodivergent students.
So I'm going to be the first one to confess that, I am not an expert on neurodivergency, right? And this is where, as a board member, we have to have an excellent working relationship with our superintendent. Because I think as we hear about what, asking what do teachers need, what sort of programs do we need, that has to come up through the superintendent and come to the board, right? So that we can act on it accordingly. If you look at South Burlington, I agree, we have some very good systems and structures in place already. We adhere to the multi-tiered systems of support framework. We do a very good job with that. We have our own in-house therapeutic program at South Point. That was something that I'm going to give kudos to our superintendent. When we lost access to Howard Center, she drove this whole concept forward, and we now have our own facility in South Burlington to support these students. We also, as a board, have to pay attention to the policies that we have. A little over a year ago, our board approved the transgender and what was it? I'm just going to look it up here. The transgender and non-binary student policy. That to me is an excellent example of what we should be doing at the board level to create this sort of welcoming environment and paying attention to these types of kids. I will say we are constrained with budget issues as well. In our budget alone this year, we've cut some what I feel are significant supports for these students, including our Big Picture program. That to me is a huge loss, and I hate to see that go. But it was an extremely expensive program for the number of kids it served. So I understand. We did, however, as I look at my list here, we are adding in an additional education teacher at South Point. We're looking to hire more para-educators and interventionists. There was a behavioral facilitator added at Orchard. So these are the kinds of things, like I said, these wraparound supports and just creating that environment where these types of kids can succeed and don't fall through the cracks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving right along here, we're going to start with Laura. This question has to do with students and public safety. So how can the school district ensure the safety of its students and teachers in our schools and the community?
So by public safety, I'm assuming you mean like from intruders in the school, or or emotional safety, or
Whatever you want to interpret it as.
so yeah, so public safety, definitely. The superintendent has made it clear that our LGBTQ plus rights, we are holding firm. Holding firm in the face of all of this. So, and all of our children should should feel safe coming to school. We do support you. We love you. We want you there. That is 100% true. In terms of the physical safety of the building, you know, every parent is concerned about children going to school, given the fact that we don't really have any gun laws. As board members, we are able to see the plans in place, which are not made public, and that is because they don't want those plans to get in the hands of somebody who should not have those plans. So I have looked at them. So I'll just speak for myself. I think the school district is in really good hands. As you know, and I want to be very clear, as good as any school can do, right? Because really, I would like to lobby for stricter gun laws. But so I do think that in terms of like the physical safety of the kids, there is a plan in case of the intruder, and you know, and again, I just want to make sure that all our LGBTQ plus trans youth feel safe coming to school, and it does not matter what's happening on a federal level. We are not backing down on that.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And Tim, how can the school district ensure the safety of its students and teachers?
Sure, and I agree with Laura because this is a multi-tiered question,
Absolutely.
right? And when I looked at it, I had to really think about it. And so I'll approach it from a couple of different levels. I do think when we think about safety, we think about that intruder, right? And the school does have a solid emergency plan in place. We're required to by law, right? That is something we monitor as a board. I also go back to the infrastructure. I mean, our buildings were built 60 years ago. They weren't designed for this kind of, this kind of environment, right? However, we are making steps to improve those buildings from a safety perspective. An example, we budgeted for air conditioning at an elementary school, so on hot days we could keep the windows closed. You know, this is a very basic safety approach, right? And but again, we are trying to retrofit old buildings, but infrastructure is important. I also want to look at things like the types of positions we have. One thing that we struggled with over the last 2 years as a district is having enough bus drivers. Now, you may not think this is a safety issue, but we heard from bus drivers, you know, hey, I'm working routes that I don't understand, I don't know, the kids don't know me, our kids getting left at the wrong stop, our parents, are they having to walk to school? These are safety issues that we need to be concerned with. And again, kudos to our superintendent and her transportation team, who have now finally almost fully staffed our transportation department, and we have a couple of new positions in the budget for bus drivers. That's a safety issue to me, right? Also having the right people in the building around behavior specialists, social emotional learning, that kind of stuff. I also will say that the school district has to maintain a solid working relationship and partnership with the city. Kudos to our Safe Routes to School task force, one of whom one of the members was a former board member, and they've worked very hard to get us set up with school zones, to look at how kids are getting back and forth to school. So this is the kind of partnership that we need to continue to support and look for other types of partnerships so we can ensure safety at all of the different levels for our kids.
Great, thank you, Tim. And yeah, it's a bit of an ambiguous question, so
It is, but
I
it's a
appreciate
welcome question.
the out of the box kind of thinking there, because a lot of those things you don't think of as safety, but they absolutely are.
Absolutely.
So, and finally, Emily, how can the school district ensure the safety of its students and teachers?
Thanks. I think my answer is pretty similar to what we've been hearing. Over the years, I've seen the schools really ramp up their security, like locked doors, frosted glass. You know, all the teachers have lanyards, and it looks a lot different than it did in 1998 when I graduated from high school. So I feel like we've been keeping up, and like you said, it's required, but it also, I think the kids feel like they're in a safe place when they're at school. So to me, I was thinking more of safety in terms of a place where the school being a place where people feel accepted for who they are and don't worry about discrimination or having to hide anything about themselves. With the climate of the nation today, I think it's really important that the district maintains that sense of belonging and welcoming. And I think that has also changed a lot since when I was in high school, which is wonderful to see. This generation of kids really impressed me with how they are able to, they don't even think of it as accepting. It's just, that's who that person is. And I don't even have to wonder if it's okay, because that's who they are. So I've been really impressed with this generation of children, and I'm impressed with the way the school is holding on to their value of all the students and not going to back down just because there's certain people who want them to. I think the school, I'm really proud of the way that they treat all the children and make them feel like they belong.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. And we're going to keep going here. We're going to start with Tim for this question that has to do with mental health. So how can South Burlington schools best support student mental health?
So again, this is one of those questions where I am not a mental health expert, right? And I'm going to confess that freely. So as a board member, it's important to listen to constituents and experts and again, have this solid working relationship with our superintendent so we can ensure that we're providing the best environment possible. There are so many tiers to this, and I can't even begin to kind of discuss them all, but I agree, and we've heard this term a couple of times, a safe, comfortable, welcoming environment, and that's really important to establish. So, like I said, we had a lot of support for those years, and that has dwindled away, but we still have a lot of kids. We are still experiencing a huge issue with mental health issues. The question is, where do those resources come from now, right? And it's going to be a challenge for the district to provide those supports. This is something I hope at the state level, I believe they're paying attention to it. Where is that money going to come from? Do those supports need, what needs to be in the school and what needs to be outside of the school? Again, I mean, we're gonna want those behavioral specialists, social emotional learning coaches. We want to ensure we've got appropriate extracurriculars available, athletics, things like that, because those are the things that kids come to school for, right? And that keep them engaged and keep them looking forward to being here. I will say the board did deal with the cell phone policy this year. We were asked about implementing a policy. We chose to let the superintendent implement that through an operations approach, and it seems to be working quite well. That's a really important aspect of mental health. We realize we did hear significant testimony on that. So I keep going back to kudos to our superintendent, but it seems to be working quite well. And we've heard from our student reps on the board that it's working well. So I guess it's a multi-tiered approach, multi-pronged approach to mental health. And I certainly am not going to sit here and come up with all of the answers, but I appreciate the question.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Tim. And Emily, this same question for you about mental health.
Yeah, I think, as I've mentioned earlier, that the mental health of our students, I think, has been greatly impacted due to the events of the world for the past 5 or 6 years. So less social interaction because of our phones and then COVID isolation. And it wasn't just the kids in COVID, their parents were in COVID too, trying to cope with it. And so those years that went by, really we haven't been able to have time, as we were talking earlier, to even acknowledge what happened, what went on for these people, everybody, during the COVID pandemic. And I think coming back from it, we really haven't, we had some supports, like you said, and it's not over yet. And so those kinds of things have weighed on our students, but I do also think that supporting mental health and promoting well-being has also become more acceptable in our culture, which is wonderful. And I think the school knows this and is actively trying to promote kids taking care of themselves. But by talking about it, again, not trying to hide it, it's hard. Life is hard. I think we could think of some other creative approaches. I mean, we have guidance counselors maybe tapping into their ideas, or we could even have it be a project in psychology. Like, what kind of tools would you implement to help keep schools to feel more safe for everybody and more belonging? So there's also a lot of great student leaders who I think could help make all the students feel more inclusive. But then I also really feel like we need to support our teachers to be the positive role models in these kids' lives and have the time and energy to do it. They're not just teaching algebra anymore, they're now teaching algebra and also having to attend to the mental health environment of their classroom, which can be challenging. And so I think if we give them more training and more protocols, more skills, but also let them know what's coming next. If an event occurs, they would know what they're going to do and that someone's got their back. It's not a panic situation. Keeping it as little panic as possible, to just have a plan in place and an understanding of that, I think could bring a lot of relief to the whole environment. So,
Okay. Thank you, Emily. And finally, Laura, how can South Burlington schools best support student mental health?
Yeah, that is a very good question. You know, we do have, I think South Burlington is doing as best it can. We do have Howard clinicians on staff. There are definitely more of a societal understanding. Of course, my knee-jerk reactions always is nobody should have a phone. I've been teaching for 30 years, and the difference now, there's less interaction. I think parents would be really surprised. But again, that's a societal issue. You know, that societal issue comes into school, and until everybody agrees that the phone is actually causing some problems, because I do see it causing problems, and children do torment each other on social media in the halls. I see it every single day. And I have had conversations with children saying, if you could just put that away, don't look at it anymore. But they can't, right? They can't. So, so we, you know, again, and we did, the superintendent did at an operations level, you know, talk to her, you know, her administrative team, and I think it does seem to be going well. We do have 2 student reps on the board. I don't think we utilize them enough. That student voice would be really, really critical. And I think, you know, for this year, that's one of my goals, is to definitely, you know, get them to talk more in meetings so I can hear what they have to say. So, yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you. We have just enough time here for about 1 or 2 more questions. So this next one has to do with measuring success. So Emily, standardized test results continue to decline for Vermont students. How do you measure the success of the school district and the people that it serves?
Okay. Standardized test grades are down all over the country, and I think we've talked about some reasons why that might be the case in terms of how kids and students and teachers are feeling right now. And you know, to measure success, you need a current state and a goal and a metric. And that's really easy to do with standardized testing. But as a person who did so badly on my SATs that grade goes to my grave, no one will ever know what I got, I do not believe that it's a good way of measuring everyone's abilities and intelligence. So I think it could be interesting to decide as a school what success looks like for us. Does it mean like increased students reporting that they feel that they have a personal connection with an adult in the school, or maybe more students participating in optional school events because they feel the pride in their school and a belonging. So what we could do is, I work as a project manager at UVM Health Network, and I've been there for about 10 years. And one of the tricks we like to use is called Future Backwards, where you can decide what is the perfect utopia, what would we like our school to look like, and then work backwards from there to identify the metric we would use to measure that, and then compare it to what current state is now. So I think that could be an interesting challenge.
All right, cool. Thank you, Emily. And Laura, how do you measure the success of the school district and the people it serves?
Yes, yeah. So again, you can look at data, right? Graduation rates, standardized tests. You know, having proctored many of those tests, you know, it's just a snapshot on one day and that 1 hour of that child's life. And again, I do think that we have to look at it. I would, in my heart of hearts, I'd like to look at school a little bit more holistically. Like, how involved is everybody? Is everybody? I mean, there's a lot of opportunities to get involved. I mean, clubs in particular that don't involve, tryouts and things like that. I think that I think that is so critical, particularly in those middle school years as well, when there's so many changes going on for children in that time. It's when a lot of kids drop out of things and don't participate. But keeping the kids active and participating in school and feeling like they belong, I don't exactly know how one measures that, because we can look at test scores all day long. It doesn't tell me anything about the human beings in that room. And I really want to know, does everybody feel comfortable, participating? And I know, Tim mentioned big picture, and I can't stop thinking about it. And that is something that does feel like a gut punch. At the same time, one thing that I would measure success with South Burlington is, okay, we understand how important that is. So let's partner with Burlington, because I'm wrong, but I think that Burlington has a big picture program.
We do, yep.
Yeah, and why can't we pool our resources? That to me is success, because I do know kids who've gone through big picture. I heard the parents talking, and I thought, why are we doing this? I understand it's a cost-saving thing, but at the same time, I think we can do better by those kids, and I think we can, share resources. So that's kind of how I'm envisioning success at this point.
Wonderful.
So, thank you.
Laura. And finally, Tim, the same question about measuring success.
Sure. So, as a district, we have an ENDS policy, and our goal is to prepare students for their next step. That's basically, what the board is there for. If you look at South Burlington stats, we actually do quite well. I think we have a 91% graduation rate. We score very highly on a lot of the standardized tests. There are definitely areas where we need improvement, definitely with certain demographics for sure. Again, it's up to the board to monitor that and to ensure that we're working through the superintendent to improve those scores, understanding what those issues are, right? Again, the one area where I feel a little like I don't know if we're actually succeeding or not is that did we prepare them appropriately, right? And I'm not sure if we've ever talked about this on the board, or there's ever been any action around this. But if you look out 4 or 5 years, how did these kids do when they graduated? Did we actually succeed in preparing them, right? That's our stated goal, and I'm not sure if we've ever had a metric around that. When it comes to the standardized testing and that data to help us improve our pathway to that goal, I think we also need to be looking for more assistance from the Agency of Education in standardizing the data, in collecting that data, in better comparisons and such. I believe that effort's underway. I know in South Burlington we've implemented better data collection programs, right? So hopefully that will begin to reap some benefits for us over the next few years. But ultimately, I just want to remind people that South Burlington does do pretty well on these standardized tests and preparing students. So. That's, to me, that's a great, and just our reputation. We have a great reputation. I think that speaks for itself.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all. We're out of time, so we have a few questions that we didn't get to, but I do want to give you all a chance to give a closing statement. And if there's something in those last couple of questions that you really wanted to get out to your constituents, feel free to include that in your closing. But for this, we'll start with Laura.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much,
Absolutely.
Emily. Really do appreciate it. And I think what I would do is go back to my opening statement, or more about supporting the budget. So I really do implore people to vote yes for our children on March 4th. I think that this is our opportunity to act locally. And is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. Is it the best that we could offer? Yes, I do strongly believe that. And I would really encourage people to vote yes, and understand that having a revote would be even more difficult. And this is our moment, to do what's right for South Burlington. So that, I think that would be my main message. Yeah, so thank you.
So much. And Tim, your closing statement.
So I'm going to echo what Laura said. I really hope our budget passes. I hope folks understand the importance of the budget and what we're hoping to achieve in our district. As far as myself personally, I appreciate this opportunity, and if I believe I'm running uncontested, so I guess I'll be back on the board. But I appreciate all that the tremendous community support we've received. We hear a lot of different voices, a lot of different perspectives, but we have great community members, and we do get a lot of support. And I just want to thank our community for providing that to us. It really makes that day-to-day job of being a board member that much more pleasant and nicer. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tim. And Emily, your closing statement.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to kind of echo what Laura said earlier about one of my main focuses would be trying to get the voices of the people who are in our schools. In my work at the hospital, we use something called human-centered design, which focuses on talking to the people who are there doing it every day, because they have the best information that we could use to fix the problems, the wicked problems, which is another term we use, which means the problem behind the problem. And I'll tell you, in my 10 years of experience, the problem behind the problem is mostly always culture. And so my deep thought is that the culture within the school needs to come up to the caliber of the people who are in the school, because we have wonderful teachers and administrators and students. So I would love to work with the community, the students, the teachers, the administrators to just dig deep, ask the questions, get everybody in there to try to find the problem behind the problem and find ways that we can bring up that culture for everybody so they can enjoy themselves and have a positive experience at school.
Amazing. Well, Tim, Laura, and Emily, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I do just want to remind folks that you will see Tim and Laura's name on the ballot. You will not see Emily's name on the ballot. She is running as a write-in candidate. And with that being said, town meeting day is next Tuesday. So we want to thank you for tuning in to our election coverage. This is our last forum in a series of our election forums this last couple of months. You can watch all of our forums on demand at cctv.org/TMD2025 to be informed before you vote on Tuesday, March 4th. And then don't forget to tune in to Town Meeting TV that evening for our live election results show at 7 p.m. Thanks again for watching and sharing Town Meeting TV. Have a great night.